Good morning. It is an early October morning and it seems like the time of year to make some things from pumpkin. And I have pumpkin from last year I want to use up before this year's pumpkin goes into the freezer. So this I poured into a strainer and set over a bowl last night and left it in the refrigerator, and now I have a little bit of a thicker puree, and I have this liquid as well. So this puree will be a little bit more like the canned pumpkin, and all these recipes that I have use canned pumpkin. So I wanted this to be a little bit more like that. And I thought that I would make some sourdough bread and use that pumpkin juice that came out some other day. Today, I'm thinking cinnamon rolls, donuts, a chai latte, and if we can get to it, a pumpkin roll. These recipes are all either gluten-free or I'm going to make them gluten-free, as well as dairy-free. Not vegan, I do use eggs, but not dairy or gluten. First, I need to get my coffee strained because I make cold brew coffee and I need a cup of that right now before we start anything else. While I do that, I will also unload the dishwasher and then we can get started. I strain this first just through a mesh strainer. This is 170 grams of coffee in a half-gallon jar. I let that sit, it's ground, and I let it sit in the refrigerator overnight for, I aim for 18 to 20 hours. I tried something new this time. I put a vanilla bean in. This is not a fresh vanilla bean. It's one that I used to make vanilla extract, and then I probably extracted the seeds at some point to make ice cream or something else like that. But then when that is spent, I dry them, and now I can use them again for something subtle like this. Okay, so while this is draining, I'm going to unload the dishwasher. Now once this has done its initial drain, I'm going to do it again with some cheesecloth to get any of the really fine particles out. And I have coffee for quite a few days already made. I do not like to drink it cold. I like to heat it up. This is double strength coffee, so half a cup goes in here and then I fill the rest with water, pour it into a pot and warm it up. Let's get started. First, I want to make some cinnamon rolls, or I'm going to make cinnamon rolls and donuts kind of at the same time, but the cinnamon rolls have more sitting time, so let's mix those up first. how beautiful that is. Okay, first, I want to get my yeast dissolved. So what I need, I'll link all these recipes below. 7 grams of yeast. I keep this in my freezer. Just a little bit of sugar. This is cashew milk. I'm going to warm this up just a little bit using the pan that my coffee's in right now, and that's ready. I need 90 grams of milk. I'm going to add just a tiny bit of avocado oil to the amount of milk I need. So I put only 86 grams in here, and I'm going to get up to 90 with this oil. And the reason for that is that this recipe calls for whole milk. Whole milk has some fat in it, which really contributes to the richness of the cinnamon roll. So I want to put a little bit of fat into my cashew milk, which wouldn't have very much at all. Just want to warm that up a little tiny bit. I don't want to kill the yeast, but I do want to give the yeast a chance to grow more quickly than if it was cold. Now I need my psyllium husk mixture. I need 12 grams. I'll mix this with water. It will make a gel very quickly. This is warm but not hot water. It's getting thicker already. Now I want to get all of my dry ingredients to a nice big bowl. Tapioca starch, 170 grams. Millet flour, you can buy this, I grind my own, which is a very affordable way to make gluten-free flour, 120 grams. Buckwheat flour. This recipe actually calls for sorghum. I have buckwheat, and it does say that that is a substitution. So either sorghum or buckwheat. We need 50 grams. Now my cashew milk is cooled down enough. So let's add that to the yeast and sugar. Forgot about my coffee. I'm not sure I can taste the vanilla. Maybe a little bit. Maybe it just gives even a more smooth flavor. It's already very smooth. If I ever have to drink coffee that's just been brewed, like in a French press is what I have. If I don't have cold brew ready, it is so bitter. Cold brew is really, really good. Okay, so there's my yeast and sugar and milk mixture. Okay, back to this, we need xanthan gum. 7 grams. It's quite a lot because we want quite a bit of stretch in this dough, and xanthan gum helps hold a gluten-free flour together. And 1 teaspoon of salt. Now we need our pumpkin spice flavors. You probably could just substitute pumpkin spice for all of these spices, but I'm just going to follow the recipe here because I don't have any pumpkin spice made up yet, but we're gonna have to do that today. Okay, I need 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, half a teaspoon of ginger. All I have is this ginger turmeric mix, which I think will be great for the color of these buns, but I will go a little heavier than a half a teaspoon because it's not just ginger in here. It smells really good. It's also really light. I ground this myself from leftover roots that I had made into a drink. So it's a little bit lighter and fluffier than probably what you buy at the store. So I'll use almost a teaspoon of that. 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. Probably about good. 1/8 of a teaspoon of allspice. Okay, I think we are almost done with the scale. Let's mix that together. Oh, we also need our sugar in here. And that is brown sugar, which I don't keep on hand, I make it. Kind of the easier route for making brown sugar is to measure the sugar with the dry ingredients and measure the molasses, which is the other part of brown sugar, and with the wet ingredients. And that's what I'm gonna do right now. About 3½ tablespoons. I'm gonna do 3 tablespoons of sugar and 1/2 tablespoon of molasses. Because I already used 1/2 tablespoon of sugar in my yeast mixture, which is looking very alive. 1, 2, 3. And I'll remember to add this to my egg and pumpkin mixture. I'm gonna mix my egg and pumpkin right into my psyllium husk. Grams, which is about 1/2 cup. That's beautiful pumpkin, nice and thick now. And 1 egg. And our 1/2 tablespoon of molasses. Okay, now we are done with this. Gosh, I've been forgetting about my coffee. I don't know why or how. Sticky is good. Sticky means a tender, light dough when it's finished, but it can be very hard to work with. And we will put this in the refrigerator to chill before we try and work with it, which will make it a lot easier. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna scrape the sides, and then I'm gonna add in our leaf lard. This recipe calls for butter, but of course we are going dairy-free. Leaf lard is the fat around the kidneys of the pig, and if properly rendered, it does not taste one single bit like pork. It is beautiful in baked goods. It's pure white, and I just softened that in a bowl. I put this bowl in a bowl of warm water because we just want this to be soft enough to incorporate in here. And this is just like butter, where it will be solid at room temperature and hard in the refrigerator, which is what we want this dough to get. We want it to get workable. So put this in and work that into the dough. You could also use coconut oil, which has the same properties. I think lard is a little closer to butter in texture. It is the traditional fat for baking, but coconut oil I would use happily. There's a lot of movement upstairs, so time is short. I am still going to make those donuts today because these are the two things requested by the kids. Leo wanted cinnamon rolls when I put the options out there, and Nora wanted donuts. So we're gonna do both. Donuts might be a voiceover. And we will come back another day to do the pumpkin roll, the cake, and the chai. That sounds like an evening activity because I have a rooibos chai that's really yummy, so wouldn't have caffeine. Let's just make sure that's all mixed. You can see how sticky. Oil my hands and just smooth the top of this, which maybe isn't necessary, but it will look better. We will cover it, but this will also help the top from drying out. Okay, there's our dough. A damp towel and let it double in size. Okay, now that we've got the mixer out, I think I'll just go ahead and use it for the donuts as well. And I think I can get these together really quickly. This is not a gluten-free recipe, so I'm going to substitute in my gluten-free flour mix, which I mixed up a bunch of it last night, so I'm ready. And then I'll just add a half a teaspoon of xanthan gum, a quarter teaspoon per cup. And there's 2 cups in this recipe. So let's get this all mixed together and into the oven. Maybe we can have some donuts with our coffee. I'm not even gonna clean this bowl. I'm just gonna use it again. You know, there's traces of yeast in here, but that's not gonna bother anything. I'm gonna measure it right into this bowl. My plan is to use all of this pumpkin. Let's see how far we get with these two. This uses a lot of pumpkin. These should have a nice pumpkin flavor. Okay, that is 15 ounces. Uh-oh, I'm getting low. Makes a lot of donuts. I was noticing. Maybe I'll make some of these into muffins. I don't have a lot of donut pans. 1/3 cup vegetable oil. I use avocado. When I need a liquid at room temperature oil. This recipe calls for butter, so we will use lard. And they want it melted. 4 tablespoons. In goes vanilla, a teaspoon. There's our melted lard. Three eggs. And I'm going to blend that up really well with my paddle. While that mixer is running, I'm going to add my gluten-free flour blend to my bowl, along with xanthan gum. I use about 1/4 teaspoon per cup of flour. So in this case, I would use 1/2 teaspoon of xanthan gum. Now, baking powder, I just run that through a little sieve because mine's very clumpy. I make it myself. I do not add the non-clumping agent, which would be a little bit of arrowroot powder, and I just run it through that. Then I have my pumpkin pie spice and salt. Now it's all going to get blended. And the nice thing about gluten-free flour is you don't really need to worry about over mixing it. In fact, it's good to mix it really well, more than you would mix a gluten-containing flour, because the smoother it is, the nicer end product you'll get. I baked these at 350 and they did not take the whole 15 minutes, especially those little ones were done a little bit sooner. This is 1/4 cup of sugar and 3/4 teaspoon of cinnamon that I'm stirring together. And then rather than melting lard and dipping these in, I just spread a little bit on top. And since they were hot, it melted right in and made it so the cinnamon sugar could stick. And then I'm going to reuse this cinnamon sugar for the cinnamon buns when those are ready to be rolled up, since I don't need all of it for these donuts. I had to eat some breakfast before I try one of these, but now let's try one while they're still warm. Mine's one of a big one. So these have the cinnamon and sugar on top. I didn't do that with the muffins because we don't need all that extra sugar all the time, but fun to have a little donut with some topping. Very light. This is the recipe. Very pumpkin-y. This had a lot of pumpkin. This is the one that was not a gluten-free recipe, but we subbed in gluten-free flour and added some xanthan gum to act as gluten. And that was a very easy substitution. These are really good. Very pumpkin-y. So you saw that the dough for the cinnamon buns is nice and puffy. So here I'm going to add more sugar and more cinnamon and some molasses to my donut cinnamon sugar mixture so that I can make the filling for those cinnamon buns. To mix in the lard, I'm just moving into a bigger bowl, and I'm not going to melt this lard because I think working with kind of a paste would be easier and won't sink into the dough as much. I'm just measuring out how big I want this to be so I have an idea of where to roll it to on the parchment paper. So I'll use some of my all-purpose gluten-free flour to dust that parchment, and I will roll out these cinnamon rolls. Once they're chilled in the refrigerator, they are really easy to work with. It is not sticky. It definitely wants a little flour, but I don't need to use a lot of flour, and they're really easy to work with. Editing this made me realize I had one last bun in the freezer, so I'm warming it up to have it today. I always freeze things almost immediately. I like to try it and then I break it up into single servings and flash freeze it and then put it in a bag, because if it's out of sight, I don't always think of it. And if I eat too much stuff like this, I really don't feel good. So although I love making it and I love eating it, I really have to be careful about overdoing it. So the safest place for these kind of things is in the freezer. So rather than cutting cinnamon buns after I roll them up, I like to cut them before I roll them up, and it makes a perfect rolled bun. You don't need to worry about it wrinkling in when you cut it or smushing down. And I think it works really well. I'm just going to cover these with plastic so they can rise, and they need to double in size. That would take about an hour depending on how warm your kitchen is. Once these were nice and puffy, I baked them in a 350-degree oven for about 45 minutes. I was just looking for a really nice color on top, and then because this is a gluten-free dough, you can check it just the way you would like a quick bread, like sticking a toothpick in there to see if it comes out clean. I'm also melting some more lard so that I can brush the tops of these as soon as they come out while they're still warm, so that can soak in and just make them soft and rich, and that really did the trick. The recipe I'm following does a maple cream cheese frosting. Now, I don't want to use cream cheese, so I'm just going to omit that. Still use the maple syrup and just make a simple powdered sugar glaze. I'm adding vanilla extract, and I'll stir this up and just thin it as much as it needs with cashew milk. Now, the recipe also said to sift your powdered sugar, which I skipped because I didn't feel like it, but really should, because powdered sugar gets pretty clumpy and I couldn't get all the clumps out, or I didn't try very hard, and the presentation would have been nicer without those clumps of powdered sugar, but it was still good. It's nice to have little rituals like using a bunch of pumpkin and pumpkin spice to divide the seasons and really make you feel like you're leaving one and entering another, and that is absolutely what these little buns have done. See you next time.